The geopolitical dynamics of the 21st century are being reshaped by emerging powers, with China and the United States leading the charge in this transformative period. The influence of China, in particular, has grown substantially on the global stage, positioning itself as a powerful economic force and a challenger to Western dominance. At the center of this global shift is the BRICS group, a coalition comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which has become increasingly assertive in counterbalancing the influence of the United States and its allies. China, due to its economic clout and its strategic ambitions, has emerged as a key player within this group, signaling its intention to reshape international norms and institutions to reflect its interests. The rivalry between China and the United States extends far beyond trade and technology. It is a complex competition that encompasses global strategic influence, where both nations seek to assert dominance over international decision-making bodies and influence the direction of global policy. BRICS has positioned itself at the heart of this struggle, advocating for reforms that challenge the existing Western-led order and propose a more inclusive and multipolar world. In recent developments, BRICS made a bold decision that left the United States and its allies stunned, a move that raised questions about the future of international financial systems and the power of institutions like the World Bank. Could the World Bank, long seen as a pillar of the global financial system, face a crisis or collapse under these new pressures? In this video, we will explore the changing dynamics of global power, the growing influence of BRICS, and the implications of these developments on global governance. But before we dive into the heart of the matter, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with the latest insights from Top Wonders. The shift towards a multipolar world over the past few decades. Many countries have grown increasingly disillusioned with the current international system, which they argue disproportionately favors Western powers. The United Nations (UN), in particular, has become a focal point for these grievances. While no country has officially left the UN, dissatisfaction with its structures and decision-making processes is widespread, especially among nations in the global south. The UN Security Council, for example, remains dominated by 5 permanent members: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China, each holding veto power, effectively controlling the global agenda on key issues such as sanctions, peacekeeping, and international security. This concentration of power has led to calls for reform, particularly from BRICS nations, which collectively represent a significant portion of the world's population and economic output. Despite representing over 40% of the global population and nearly a quarter of global GDP, countries in the global south, including the BRICS members, remain excluded from the most influential decision-making bodies. For example, Africa, with its 54 countries, accounts for nearly 28% of UN membership, but has no permanent seat on the Security Council. This lack of representation has fueled widespread criticism, with many arguing that the UN structures are outdated and fail to reflect the realities of a changing world order. BRICS has been at the forefront of these calls for reform, pushing for a more equitable distribution of power within the UN and other global institutions. These nations argue that the current system is a relic of the mid-20th century, where the world order was defined by Western dominance following World War II. The continued dominance of the United States and its allies in these institutions is seen by many in the global south as a form of neocolonialism, with Western powers dictating the terms of global governance and shaping international norms to suit their interests. The critique of Western bias and double standards. One of the most persistent critiques leveled against Western powers by BRICS countries is the perceived double standard in the application of international norms, particularly in the realm of human rights. While Western nations frequently condemn human rights violations in countries like Russia and China, they are often less vocal about similar or even more severe violations occurring within their own borders. This discrepancy is most evident when examining issues such as systemic racism, police violence, and economic inequality in the United States, Canada, and Australia. These issues, which disproportionately affect Black, Indigenous, and minority communities, are often overlooked or downplayed in international discourse, despite the fact that they remain pervasive and unresolved. The dominance of Western media in shaping public opinion and setting the global agenda has played a significant role in perpetuating these double standards. Media coverage tends to focus on human rights violations in countries that are considered geopolitical adversaries, such as Russia and China, while downplaying or framing similar issues in the West as systemic failures rather than deliberate policies. This has created an imbalance in global perceptions, where Western countries are often seen as champions of human rights, despite their own significant shortcomings in this area. For example, the treatment of refugees provides a stark illustration of this double standard. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the European Union quickly activated a mechanism that granted millions of Ukrainian refugees the right to work, access healthcare, and move freely within the EU. This response stood in stark contrast to the treatment of refugees from the Middle East and Africa during previous crises, where many European countries erected barriers, conducted pushbacks at sea, and signed controversial agreements aimed at reducing migration. Critics argue that the warm reception of Ukrainian refugees reflects cultural, racial, and religious biases, as Ukrainians are seen as culturally and religiously more similar to Europeans than refugees from non-European countries. This selective compassion is not limited to Europe. In the United States, issues of racial inequality and police violence persist, particularly within Black and Indigenous communities. Movements like Black Lives Matter have brought attention to systemic injustices, yet these issues often do not receive the same level of international scrutiny as similar violations in non-Western countries, with Western powers holding the most significant voting shares and decision-making authority. BRICS nations, despite their growing economic importance, have limited influence in these organizations. For example, China, the world's second-largest economy, has less voting power in the IMF and World Bank than smaller Western nations like the United Kingdom and France. Long-standing grievance from BRICS countries has been the disproportionate influence of Western powers in global financial institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank. These institutions were established after World War II with the aim of fostering global economic stability and development, but their structures have largely remained unchanged, with Western powers holding the most significant voting shares and decision-making authority. BRICS nations, despite their growing economic importance, have limited influence in these organizations. For example, China, the world's second-largest economy, has less voting power in the IMF and World Bank than smaller Western nations like the United Kingdom and France. This has led to frustration, as BRICS countries believe that they should have more say in the governance of these institutions, given their increasing contribution to global trade and investment. In recent years, BRICS has sought to challenge the dominance of the IMF and World Bank by establishing alternative financial institutions, such as the New Development Bank (NDB), which aims to provide funding for infrastructure projects in developing countries without the conditions imposed by Western-led institutions. This shift in global financial power has significant implications for the future of international economic governance, as it threatens to undermine the existing order and create a more multipolar system. The path forward, a new global order, as BRICS continues to gain strength and influence. It is clear that the global balance of power is undergoing a significant shift. The growing dissatisfaction with the existing international institutions, combined with the increasing influence of emerging powers like China and India, is reshaping the way global governance functions. The challenge to Western dominance, particularly in the realms of finance, human rights, and international security, is only going to intensify in the coming years. The question remains, will these emerging powers succeed in creating a new world order, or will the existing systems of governance manage to adapt to these changes? One thing is certain, the geopolitical landscape is in flux, and the decisions made by BRICS and other emerging economies will play a pivotal role in shaping the future of global politics. As the world enters this new era, it is important to consider the implications of these shifts, not just for the countries involved, but for the entire international community. Long-standing grievance from BRICS countries has been the disproportionate influence of Western powers in global financial institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank. These institutions were established after World War II with the aim of fostering global economic stability and development, but their structures have largely remained unchanged.